For a long, long time, we all thought we knew the whole story about cannabis. But what if that story was mostly wrong? Today, we're diving into some really groundbreaking new science that's turning a lot of old beliefs on their head. Everything from brain health to, you won't believe it, cancer treatment. The latest data is telling a very different story, and it might just surprise you. So let's get right into it. We're kicking things off with a pretty bold question, right? And that's because the data we're about to look at seriously challenges decades of public health messaging. Now, this isn't about opinions or what someone thinks, it's about following the evidence. And right now, that evidence is leading us down some very unexpected paths.
So, here's the plan for this explainer. We're going to break down 5 key areas. First, we'll look at the old assumptions. Then, we'll get into some surprising new data on brain health, some incredible research on cancer, a new way to think about pain relief, and finally, we'll look at what the real numbers, not the hype, say about teens.
For so many years, the whole conversation around cannabis was really shaped more by fear than by actual facts. But you know what? That's all starting to change. We're finally getting to a point where we can look past all the stigma and just see what the evidence has to say. The reason this whole narrative is shifting is because the science itself has gotten so much better. We're moving away from small anecdotal reports and into these massive long-term studies. And what they're showing us is a much, much more complex picture of how compounds like THC and CBD actually interact with our bodies.
All right, let's jump into our first major discovery. And honestly, this one's a big one. The old idea that cannabis is just flat out bad for your brain, well, that's being seriously challenged, especially when we start talking about the aging process.
And the source for this finding is incredibly solid. We're not talking about some small one-off study. This comes from the UK Biobank, which is one of the most respected and comprehensive biomedical databases in the entire world. This is the real deal.
And when I say this study was massive, I mean it. This analysis looked at more than 26,000 people, all between the ages of 40 and 77. When you have a sample size that big, it gives the findings a ton of weight and credibility. So what did they find out?
Well, this is where the old stereotype just gets completely flipped on its head. The study found that people who had used cannabis over their lifetime actually did better than non-users in key brain functions, things like memory, attention, and executive function. And what's really crucial here is they also showed more preserved volume in the hippocampus, that's the memory center of the brain. This suggests there might be some kind of neuroprotective effect going on. Okay, let's move on to our next section, which is just as surprising: cancer research. Now, to be clear, scientists aren't looking at cannabinoids as some kind of miracle cure. Instead, they're exploring them as a potential tool to be used alongside conventional treatments for some of the most aggressive cancers out there.
The key word here is synergy. It's all about how cannabinoids can help other therapies work even better. And they're seeing some real promise in lab models of cancers that are just notoriously difficult to treat, like triple-negative breast cancer, which is known for not responding well to standard treatments.
And this chart just shows you how powerful that effect can be. In the lab, metastatic invasion is just a fancy term for the cancer's ability to spread. And what they found was a combination of CBD and CBC cut the spread of these aggressive cancer cells by about 55%. That is a massive finding that could really open up new doors for treatment. And it's not just breast cancer either. There are early human trials looking at combining cannabinoid-based sprays with chemo for really aggressive brain tumors like glioblastoma. And they're starting to see some real measurable benefits. It's like a whole new frontier in cancer therapy is opening up. So, from oncology, let's pivot to pain management. I mean, millions of people suffer from acute pain, like migraines, and we all know finding something that actually works can be a huge struggle. Well, a recent very high-quality clinical trial put a cannabinoid combo to the test. You know, the numbers here really speak for themselves. This was a proper randomized controlled trial comparing a THC and CBD mix against a placebo. And just 2 hours in, the cannabinoid group was doing way better across the board. Look at the pain-free number. More than twice as many people became completely pain-free. That is a huge difference. But here's the best part. This wasn't just some fleeting temporary relief. For a lot of people, it actually lasted. They were still pain-free a full 24 hours later, and some even felt the benefits for up to 48 hours. For anyone who's ever had a migraine, you know that kind of long-lasting relief is an absolute game changer. Okay, on to our final deep dive. We have to talk about one of the most persistent fears surrounding cannabis legalization, and that is its effect on teenagers.
So, what does the actual long-term data tell us about teen usage here in the States? The data is actually pretty shocking because it's so clear. When you look at the real long-term trends, you just don't see this big surge in teen use that people were worried about. In fact, for the last 25 years, the numbers have been steadily going in the other direction. Let's put some hard numbers on that. If you go back to 1999, about 27% of teens reported using cannabis in the past month. Now, fast forward to 2023. That number has dropped all the way down to around 18%. That's a huge decline that flies right in the face of the whole gateway narrative.
And this chart breaks it down even more. This looks at the period between 2014 and 2021, a time when laws were changing all over the country. And what do you see? For kids from 8th to 12th grade, usage either stayed the same or kept going down. The data just doesn't back up the idea that teen use is exploding. So, what does this all mean when you put it together? It really feels like we're moving out of an era of fear and assumption and into an era of real hard science. The entire conversation is fundamentally changing right before our eyes.
So let's just do a quick recap. We've seen really compelling data suggesting it could help protect our brains as we get older, new potential as a partner in cancer therapy, clear evidence that it can provide superior pain relief, and the fact that teen use is actually going down, not up. Each one of these findings is a direct challenge to the old way of thinking. But of course, we've got to keep a level head about all this. As this quote says, the science is still emerging. These findings are incredibly exciting, for sure, but they mostly show us that we need even more big, high-quality clinical trials to really confirm these benefits and figure out exactly how it all works. So we'll leave you with this question. Out of everything we covered today, from brain health to cancer to teen usage, what was the one piece of data that really stood out to you? The one that made you think? Let us know what you think in the comments. And hey, if you found this breakdown useful, do us a favor and subscribe for more. Thanks so much for watching.